Next up is Ken Pulse, FCPA, FCMA, President of Excel Guru Consulting Incorporated, a company dedicated to helping users get the most from their data. His passion lies in exploring tools to turn data into information and teaching others how to benefit from them. Ken is an avid blogger, software developer, author, and trainer with over 20 years of corporate accounting and IT experience, if a little shy. Oh no, maybe that's not Ken. Anyway, he is one of the world's leading experts in Microsoft Excel, Power Query, and Power BI, and provides live and online training to clients all around the world. Please stop, Ken. We're trying to compete with you. Anyway, in recognition of his contributions, Ken has held the prestigious Microsoft MVP distinction since 2006. In both the Excel and data platform categories. So it's with great pleasure I'm going to try and get Ken to come into the fold now. Ken, welcome to Excel Guru Base. We'll just put you up on screen. How's it all going? Are you over? It looks like you're at home. So you're on Vancouver Island.
This is my my home office. Yes. Am I not on screen?
Not want to get you there. Can anyone see Ken at the moment? It's not going across. I keep pressing. Sorry, Ken, you are. Look, take it.
My thing says live. I don't know what that. Oh, apparently people can't see me. That's okay. You know what? That doesn't matter. I'm sure you can hear me.
There you are.
So it's all good.
You know.
All right. There we go.
So what you got to tell us?
Nothing. I mean, I'm sitting here in my home office, ready to show you some cool things about Monkey Tools, make your life a little bit easier, and build better models faster. So, what more to say than that?
I suppose we'd better get on with it then, hadn't we? So without further ado, it's time for boosting Excel efficiency with Monkey Tools with Ken Pulse.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this session on boosting your Excel efficiency with Monkey Tools. My name's Ken Pulse, I'll be your host for the session, but before we dive into the content, I'll just pause briefly to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about who I am. So the first thing you should know about me is that I am a fully qualified and designated accountant from Nanaimo, British Columbia, Canada. I hold both the FCPA and FCMA designations. I run a little website called excelguru.ca where we have a whole bunch of free help articles on Excel as well as a free help forum. I'm also one of the founding partners behind skillwave.training, which is a site where we teach you how to master Excel and Power BI and really unlock the ability to get insights from your data. If you're looking for on-demand or coached courses, this is an excellent resource to go to. I've been a Microsoft MVP across a variety of categories, including both Excel and Power BI since 2006. And as if that wasn't enough, I'm also a software developer and an author. Now, the software developer part is going to be particularly relevant today because we're going to be talking about that software, Monkey Tools. But you may also be familiar with some of my publications here, the most relevant of which would be M is for Data Monkey, one of the first books that came out about Power Query, or its replacement, bigger and better version, Master Your Data for Excel and Power BI. So let's talk about Monkey Tools. The first thing you should know about this software is the target audiences are generally Excel users building models with Power Query and Power Pivot, and users who need to audit models that they receive from others. Having said that, we've got a lot of features in here that will help just any Excel user, even if they're not working with Power Query and Power Pivot at all. Now, before we go any further, I want to bust a couple of common myths about Monkey Tools that I've heard from different people concerned about why they may or may not want to use the software. So the first thing I want to sort of go through here is my software philosophy. And number one is no license lock-in. This is really important to me as a developer. One of the most horrifying things I'll hear from someone is, Ken, I couldn't use your software because I'm concerned that if I built a model and then I sent it to somebody else, they would need to buy your software. Now, you can say this is a terrible financial decision, but I have made the decision to make sure that never happens. We never inject anything into your workbook that won't work in just plain old vanilla Excel. This tool is built for somebody who wants to be better at building. It does not put in any hooks. You send it to somebody else, and if they don't have Monkey Tools installed, everything will still work. Another big component is that we have one installer and one version, and it installs without admin rights, which means that as long as you can install software on your machine, you can install Monkey Tools, at least physically. Now, should you? Well, you may have a policy in your organization that says you're not allowed to install software. That's a totally different thing. But as long as you can install software, Monkey Tools will install for you. We follow a do no harm philosophy. We don't add anything into your workbook unless you ask, and we'll tell you what we're adding in. This is a point about making you more efficient, not sneaking things into your workbook. Our philosophy is also to go and deliver a high proportion of useful free features that will work for anybody, whether they pay a licensing fee or not. And you're going to see a lot of those as we go through our demos today. But we also do reward our pro license users with more and easier use cases to do more complex things a lot easier. So my goal here is that I want everybody to install Monkey Tools and have it on their desktop to take advantage of the different free features. But for those users who really want to actually make things a lot easier, well, I'm hoping that you'll help support us with a pro license in order to be able to do so. So the way our licensing works is that we actually install on a named user basis, and we'll allow you to actually activate your license on up to 3 computers at the same time. This means that you're covered for your work machine, your home machine, and if you've got to go to a client site and you want to use Monkey Tools there, you can install it on the machine that you're actually working with at that point in time. Now, our pricing model works like this. We have a forever free version. This contains all of the updates, bug fixes, and whatnot that we release to pro version users because we've only got one installer. It just happens to have slightly less features than what the pro version does. Now, if you want to try the pro version, you can do that. There's a pro trial, which goes for 2 weeks and then automatically reverts to a free license. We never ask to bill you for something that you're not going to use. Of course, if you love Monkey Tools, and we hope you do, a pro license subscription is available to help you unlock all of the features and get the most out of the software. The thing that I want you to be aware of here is that I want people who are using the software to be the ones that are paying for it. If you're not, I really want you to revert to the free and be able to use the useful free features. And for that reason, we'll let you opt in and out of our licensing model whenever you like. It's totally up to you to do it, but the reality here is as you need it. If you need it for a month for the pro features, you can opt in, and then if you don't for 5 months, that's no problem. When you need it again, you can opt in again, or you can just make it easy and go for an annual subscription. Whatever works best for you is the way that I want you to work with this. Full details of all pricing and the ability to actually purchase and download are available at Monkey Tools, including how to get the free or pro trial licenses. All right, so with all that awkwardness out of the way, let's go and take a look at some of the many Monkey Tools features that are available. When you install Monkey Tools, you get a new Monkey Tools ribbon inside your Excel. And this has 2 general categories of buttons or commands that you'll find. The first one are what we call convenience features, and you'll recognize these as these are buttons that exist elsewhere in Excel that we've put into one central ribbon, which should allow you to stop flipping back and forth between ribbon tabs as you're working through your data modeling journey. The other set of features are Monkey Tools specific features, where we've actually gone and built features that we think are going to help make your life a lot easier. In addition, within these groups, you'll notice the terms monkeys and sleuths. Now, what are the difference between monkeys and sleuths? Well, sleuths are detectives. They investigate things that are going on inside your workbook, where monkeys actually go and take action and do things inside your workbook. So the sleuths will tell you about what's going on. The monkeys will actually make things happen. The first feature I'd like to introduce you to is what we call our from table or range monkey. Now, this little animal will take action on your workbook. So what does it do? Well, it actually replaces the default Control-T, Control-L, and Get Data from Table experience in Excel. And this is the only feature we have that actually overrides Excel's defaults. So why would we do that? Well, if you work with Power Query, you'll know that there's a particular problem in the way that we actually go and create a table is that Excel doesn't give you the option to define your table name. If you use the Get Data from Table experience on an undefined table, it actually creates it, calls it Table 1, creates your Power Query, and if you go back and rename your table later, it breaks your Power Query. So what our from table or range monkey does is it actually allows you to name your items before creating the query. So while you're actually creating the object, you can name it right away, which is the way that the instance should be set up in my opinion. This allows us to define tables, named ranges, or dynamic arrays with their names as well. In addition, we also give you the ability to create a connection-only query to your Power Query right on the spot. Best part though, fully functional in a free license. There's absolutely nothing here that requires anything for Pro. And this is one of those features that I hope will actually get people to install Monkey Tools just to have it on their machine, even if they're only using free, just because this feature is better than what Microsoft's default is, at least in my opinion. We also have some configurable options in our Options Monkey, which allows you to use default Excel behavior for any one or all of these different items. Maybe you actually want to hold on to the default behavior for some reason. I'm not sure why, but we'll let you do it. If you want to, you can also turn on the ability to create a connection-only query by default, so you can uncheck it at runtime. So let's hop over into a quick demo and take a look at how Control-T should be functioning. All right, so in this workbook, I have 5 ranges of tabular data, none of which have tables defined on them or named ranges defined on them. They're just data. Of import, over on the right-hand side, I have 2 that are highlighted in yellow. I've highlighted the spill areas for dynamic arrays. And you can see that if I go and actually select this one, the formula is M7 to O11. It is picking this up and spilling it into the other cells. This is not a Monkey Tools feature. Your Excel must be dynamic array enabled for this to work. But I am going to show you how Monkey Tools works with dynamic arrays. Now here's the thing. I want to come over to my first table here, and I'm going to use some default Excel behavior here. I'm going to go to Format as Table, and I'm going to pick the color of the table. And what you'll see is that we get this Create Table dialog. Now this is the native version of this dialog for Excel. We cannot pick up and interrupt this Format as Table one. So if you like this one, you're going to stick with the regular version. But notice the problem is it may pick up the data and it tells me my table has headers. That's great, but it doesn't give me the ability to name this table. So let me hit cancel and show you this version. Insert, table. Now this one has been taken over by Monkey Tools. Notice that it says, hey, look, you want to create a table? We believe that's the case. You can provide a name, and it's already highlighted. So I can go and just rename this right away with my data 1. It says, where is it stored? Well, it's picked up that range, even though I had a single cell selected, and it's checked the box for my data has headers immediately. It gives me the option to create a connection-only query. I'm not going to do that right now. What I want to do is actually click OK. But I want to show you just how important this is that when I opened up this dialog, it already had the table name selected, so I could just type the table name and then I can just press enter. I don't even have to click the button to make this much more efficient. Notice that my table is now called my data 1. Beautiful, that looks great. So let's try this one. This time I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut, Control-T. Notice again, it comes up here, so I can go and call this one my data 2. Now, in this case, I do want to show off the Create Connection Only query, so I'm going to check that box there, and then I'm going to go and click OK. Now, you'll notice that we actually get a connection only query created that reads from this. The important part about this, the table's name is my data 2, and if we were to go and look at the actual query itself, we can jump in, take a look at the source and see that it is referring to my data 2. So this is a super fast way to be able to go and actually create not only the table style, but a connection only query. I do this a lot when I need to merge data or append data in different tables inside the workbooks. It can be very, very handy. Now let me show you the next little demo here. There's going to be a couple things that show up in this. Notice this data has no headers. In the Excel world for Create Table, it will tell you that it has headers as long as the data is not all text. If all of the data is text, it will uncheck that box. We think that's wrong. We think that 99% of data has headers, and we should actually flip that script around, and you should be telling me when it does not. So I'm going to go right click here, and I'm going to choose Get Data from Table Arrange. And this is the same behavior as you'd find under Get Data menu on your Data tab. And you'll notice that it comes up and says, okay, cool, what would you like to call this? So I'm going to just rename this my data 3. It tells me where is the data, and notice that it's checked the box for my data has headers. Now, in this case, it obviously doesn't, but we're not the ones that can tell you for sure on this. So we can uncheck that box. Now here's the deal. There's also one checkbox that's no longer on the screen. Only Create Connection Query. Reason being, well, you've told me you want to pull this data into Power Query. I don't want to make it only connection. I want to make sure that you have that choice later. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and say, okay, and we're going to let it pull it into Power Query so you can build the rest of the query and load it where you'd like. The important thing to recognize here, though, is that unlike Excel's default behavior, which would call this table 1, notice that mine is pointing to the custom name of the table I gave it, my data 3. We were able to actually define the name of the table up front and make sure that when we commit this query, it's still going to work. So I can now go and hit close and load. Now my default behavior is to go to connection only, but you'll notice that my table is called my data 3. So that's brilliant. All right, let's look at the next one. I'm going to go to my dynamic array here. I'm going to press Control T, and you'll notice the behavior is slightly different here. In this case, it says, oh, we've identified that you've actually got an array, so we're calling it ARY. You can call it whatever you like. So I'm going to call this one array data 1. Okay. Now, in this particular case here, we have the ability to change the scope to workbook or to sheet level if we need to do so. I'm not going to bother with that. You'll notice that because it's a dynamic array, it's picked up the hash reference that is actually required, and we have the ability to go and create our connection-only query. So if I decide to do this, I can go and say OK, and boom, there we go. Here's ARY data 1. Let's just go and check and make sure that it actually shows us the data that we're looking for. Because this is a dynamic array, and because Excel supports reading into Power Query from dynamic arrays, should that range expand, this data will be pulled in here, which is great. So I can now go and say OK. Now that's not changing any Excel functionality except for the ability to name the dynamic array before creation. Now, what if I want preface names of my own? Maybe I don't like the word array or ARY. Well, under Monkey Tools, under our Options monkey, you have the ability under Global Options to configure which experiences you would like to use. So you can actually mix and match exactly as you want. You can turn on the connection or query by default when creating tables. In this case here, I'm going to preface my dynamic arrays with DYN. So I'm just going to hit tab on that to commit it, say close. And now what you'll see is that if I go and hit Control T, it actually prefaces it with DYN. But the other important thing you'll notice here is that when it was ARY, we highlighted the entire thing. We believe that if you've put in a custom preface that you actually want that in front of everything. So now we can actually go and say, hey, this is DYN data 1. I can just start typing. I'm not replacing anything. It's appending it to this. And boom, just like that, we can say okay, and we now have our connection only query for that as well. So this is the from table or range monkey. It helps you create your tables faster. These tables will all still work for anybody who doesn't have Monkey Tools, but it's a beautiful little tool to actually show you how table creation should work. And it's available on all licenses, including free. The next feature I'd like to introduce you to is what we call our BiblioMonkey. And what is the BiblioMonkey? Well, essentially it's a library that allows you to store your favorite queries, measures, formulas, lambdas, VBA scripts, or Python. Why would you use this? Well, maybe you've got some cool scripts or measure signatures that you actually store in a text file, or you're opening up another workbook to copy and paste it across because you can't remember exactly how it works. Well, the whole concept of BiblioMonkey is to provide you with your own library database where you can store these things for later recall. But even more than that, we actually allow you to go and tag certain areas of these items so that they will be replaced when you go to insert them into your workbook. Now, if you store your database in a OneDrive or Dropbox or Box sync folder, you can actually share this across multiple machines as well. This is exactly what I do. I have the same database on every single machine I use, and I don't have to do anything to make it sync, which is pretty awesome. So once you've stored these things inside your BiblioMonkey database, you can then insert it into other workbooks on demand. Items with variable tags will prompt for contextual replacement. So if I've got a measure signature and I've said, hey, I want to prompt to have the column name replace, it will check the column names in the current workbook and say, hey, which one of these do you want to actually use? Which is pretty darn awesome as well. Now, keep in mind that the ability to actually tag these items depends on your license type. We make this super easy for pro users. You can just right click and tag whatever you want. If you're working on a free license, you can still do it, but I'll show you where the documentation is because you're going to need to do it manually. It's still possible, but we make it much easier for our pro users. In addition, the behavior, whether you can copy the item or just inject it directly into your workbook, is based on both the item and the license type. Some things are available for free users, like formulas right across the board. Other ones, like automatically injecting a query or a measure, well, those ones require a pro license, but we'll still let you copy it so that you can paste it in manually should you need to do so if you're working on a free license. So we're trying to find the best mix here. Let's go hop over and take a quick look at how the BiblioMonkey actually works. All right, so for the demo here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the process of using a BiblioMonkey setup, and then once we're done, I'll show you how we actually create the BiblioMonkey setup. We'll focus on the end first here. Now, what I'm showing you at this point here is I have a nice little schedule for a P&L statement, and you can see that we've got some horrible div 0 errors here. Now, the root of this is that my revenue is 0, and our little formula here is dividing it by 0, which is causing the problem. Now, there are obviously better ways than what I'm going to do here to fix this, but I'm going to do this the cheap and easy way, which is to wrap it in an if error function that returns 0 if there's an error. And that will work for this particular setup. Now, here's the deal. I really want to be able to commit the same formula all the way down, but I can't do that because when we come to this row, it's not the rounding function. This is a subtotal. This is a different subtotal. This one here uses a straight out subtraction. So all these formulas potentially are different, but I want to wrap each one of them in an if error statement. So that would take some time unless we use Monkey Tools. So let me just go and select the values that I'm looking for. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right click, insert from BiblioMonkey, formula, error handlers, and I've set up this one here called if error, 0. And if I go and click on this, you'll notice that immediately everything works. And what's happened? Well, if I go and take a look here, there's my original formula showing in the formula bar right there, and it has now been wrapped in if error parenthesis, 0, close parens. Now that's cool and everything else, but check this out. There's my original subtotal formula. And this one has the original subtotal formula that was in that cell. And down the bottom, my original subtraction, all wrapped in if error. So the important takeaway here is that I can take a BiblioMonkey pattern and I can actually replace the contents with the contents of the current cell and slide it in there. So we can build wrappers like this for if error functions to make life a lot easier. I tend to use this with cube functions all the time, if error blank or if error 0, because cube functions can be problematic that way. So that's the first part. Now this schedule here is actually populated from my cost and revenue page. And the problem is that my cost and revenue page isn't complete right now. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to show you how we actually can build a set of function or in a real quick manner for this one here. And this one's going to be pretty easy, honestly. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a list of month ends going through here. So I'm going to use the EO month function. Now, the trick is with this one, of course, is that I could actually write the EO month function very, very quickly, but I'm going to show you how BiblioMonkey would do it here as well. So I'm going to go right click, insert from BiblioMonkey, formula, and I've made this one here, end of next month relative. And when I go and click on that, you'll notice it's already picked up the applied to range. So there we go. It asked me to choose my base month. Notice this is fully relative. That's the way I defined it. So there we go. And how many months do I want? 1. And I can now go and say inject, and it goes and puts it in. And as you would expect, my first month was H12. That's where it targeted for 1 month. When I go and look at the next one, it's I12 for 1, J12 for 1. So it's working exactly as I need it to. Now, of course, this is a very, very easy function, probably faster to write manually than to try and actually work through the menus. But let's take a look at this one. This one's going to be a bit more complicated. What I do is I frequently set up schedules like this, where the intent is to say, I want my 2022 units and I want to increase that by a global 5% unless there is a value in this cell. And in that case, I want to use this one. So I've got a formula already set up for this, but it's a little bit more complicated. And I don't want to have to remember how to do this every single time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to inject it from the BiblioMonkey signature that I created. Right click, insert from BiblioMonkey, formula, volume forecast with override. By the way, these menus here for injecting work on a free license. Okay, this is important to realize. Now, it says, all right, we picked up your apply to range. I could change it if I needed to, but I don't. Enter the global percentage increase. Notice this one is fully absolute. I'm going to go and click on this one, and notice it gives me a fully absolute reference. My monthly override percentage is this one here, and my monthly volume is this one here. And there we go. We've got all the references in place, and when I now go and say inject, it goes and populates the entire formula through. What did it put in place? Well, it put in the signature that I built with the smart replacements. And if I go and take a look at this, you can see that it's actually gone and built me a nice big let statement with a bunch of variables and returns involved in place in order to get the formula that I wanted. So how did I actually build this the first time? Well, it's a great question. I built it manually, copied this, and took it into BiblioMonkey, and then did the replacement tagging for each of the components. And I'll show you what this looks like in just a minute. Before I do though, let me show you something else that you can recall for free. Right click, insert from Biblio function, Lambda. I have I got a few different Lambdas here that I use all the time, but how about worksheet name? If I go and inject this, it will inject the Lambda into the workbook, lets me rename it if I want to. There we go. And now that it's here, equals L underscore worksheet name A1, boom, my Lambda function is there to get me my worksheet name. So this is one of those handy ones that I hang around because I use this in the models that I build. Now, how does this actually go and work? How do you set one of these things up? Well, let me show you. The first thing, as I say, is you'd grab this entire thing here. We'd go back and we'd say, okay, cool. I want to grab my entire formula, Control C, there we go. Go into Monkey Tools and go to BiblioMonkey. Once we're inside BiblioMonkey, we would want to click Add New, and then we'd choose the appropriate type. Now I'm going to show you what the volume forecast with override looks like. This is the tagged version of the formula. This is the untagged version of the formula. Okay, so we'd paste this in, and then basically, in order to enter our global percentage increase, we would just go and say, if you're on a pro license, grab the cell reference, right click, and choose Add New Prompt, and choose from the list of contextual prompts. We'd then get a nice little dialog to fill these components in. Or if we wanted to use an existing prompt that we've already set up, we can reuse them multiple times in a single formula. Now, full disclosure, this Add New Prompt menu only appears for pro users. If you are on a free license, you can still do this, but you have to do it manually. And I'll give you a link to the Monkey Tools database where you can actually see what those tags need to look like. For now, what I want to show you though, is I want to show you what some of these signatures look like. So for our if error 0, it looks like this. We just tagged this component in the middle here, which was actually a cell reference. We carefully selected the components, which looked like this. Maybe it was A1. So we selected those. And we right clicked. I'm just going to use the existing prompt because this hasn't been rewritten. And once we do, boom, it puts it in place. We would then just hit update and we can now recall this whenever we want. Let me show you how this really works. I'm going to go and grab this guy here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm on a pro license. This is a query that reads from a database. So I'm going to go and choose to inject it directly into my workbook. I'm going to choose inject. And at this point in time, it's going to go and actually build me my Squints sales summary. Okay, and it's going to load this one to the data model. You can see it's going right now. And once we get there, we should be able to get a nice little preview of it. There we go. Let it just load its thing. And we can see that we've got 2009 sales for a location called the Squints. Now that's cool, but what if I want to use the same query but for different years and different locations? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and copy all of this code, Control C, and I'm going to go to Add New. I'm going to go and paste this in here. Puts it in nice and small right now, but I'm going to call this one here Annual Location Sales Summary. And I'm going to hit Save. There we go, that fixes that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of contextual replacement. So I'm going to grab the 2009 here, right click, Add New Prompt. I want to put in a value here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say choose a year. Notice that it replaces it with the prompt for me right there. Again, if you're on a free license, you can learn how to do this manually. If you're on the pro license, it works nicely. For the squints, that's one of my locations. I'm going to add a new prompt here. This is going to be text. We're going to say enter location and say OK. Now that that's in place, I'm going to choose to update it. And at this point, you can see that my annual location sales summary query is here. I can now choose to inject, and it comes back and it says, choose a year. I'm going to go with 2013. And for the location, I'm going to go with one of my other locations, which is tax evader. When I hit inject, this one has been driven to inject as a connection only query. And if I now go and mouse over it, you can see that we got 2013 for tax evader. So we can set up our prompts, and when we go to inject it, it automatically prompts us back with the labels that we've actually chosen. So this is a pretty cool thing. It works for all kinds of different components, for Python, for Lambda. We can't inject Office scripts or VBA for you automatically, but you can copy them. If you are on a free license, the inject button here will not work for queries, measures, VBA Office scripts. Those will allow you to copy instead, which you can then paste into the query pane or into the Power Pivot Measure Formula Guide. But if you're on a pro license, you can inject directly from here as well. And this is one of the knowledge base articles we have on BiblioMonkey. And if you scroll down on this page here, what you'll find is that there is an entire section here that lists what all of the formats of the tags actually are, as well as the full instructions for free users on how to tag things. Of course, the instructions for pro users are just a little bit higher up in the piece as well there. So it absolutely works under free, just a little bit more work. Works under pro, a lot faster, a lot easier. For this last demo, what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually show you a data modeling demo from end to end with Monkey Tools and show you how it can actually speed up the process drastically. So we're going to look at building the model using some query monkeys, including table and calendar monkey, our multi-measure monkey, and BiblioMonkey. And then we're going to look also at examining the model using Query Sleuth, DAX Sleuth, and Model Sleuth as well. Keep in mind, this is a mixture of free, but mostly pro features, although the vast majority of these will work under a pro trial as well. Let's go have a look. All right, so my goals here are that I would like to start with these three tables of data that I have: sales, categories, and budgets. And I'd like to add a little bit more information to this. I'd like a calendar table and I need some measures in order to be able to go and create a pivot table that looks like this. Now, a key import that I want you to recognize here is that I've got 3 columns of measures: transactions, sales dollars, and budget. And more importantly, if you take a look at my 2019 period, you can see that my year end actually runs from October 1st through to September 30th. So I use a non-standard year for my business here. So what I'd like to do is actually go and build a data model so that I can report on this fashion. So I'm going to flip over to my data tables, and you can see that I've got 3 of them here. These are just tables inside my workbook. We can see if we go to our queries and connections here that we do not have any queries or connections available in the workbook at this time. Now, in order to build these to the data model, what I need to do is get data and bring it into the data model. And I could absolutely do this by going to right-click and choose to get data from table or range. The challenge is that I like to use a staging setup where I have a raw data query for my extraction, a staging query for transforming, and my load query that goes into the data model. So I would need to create 9 individual queries in order to make all that work. And this is where, in Monkey Tools, we introduced something called our Table Monkey. Now, this is a pro feature, but what happens is it actually opens up and it shows you all of the different tables in the workbook. So if I go and take a look at this, we can go and click on categories. It will actually select it for me. Sales, I can select that one. And then I've got this one called Table 1, which appears to be my budgets. I'm not loving that, so I'm going to just quickly check on the table design. Yes, indeed, it is called Table 1. So let's right click and just rename this and call it budgets. You can see right away it's called budgets now in the workbook. That's a much better name. You can also see that we have a yellow query. These are staging queries for raw data. Our staging queries here for staging. And finally, the green tables will load to the data model. We can configure these individually to reduce the levels, increase the levels, make them all connection only or whatnot. We can even go and control what we prefer for our prefaces. Right now though, I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose create, and I'm going to let Monkey Tools go through and actually create all of the queries that I need. You can see on the right hand side that it's actually done all of that work in about 7 seconds. That's a heck of a lot faster than what I can do manually in order to make this work. So I'm now going to go and say close. And at this point, what I need to do is actually go and start to create my data model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go hop over to Monkey Tools tab. We're going to go to Manage Data Model. We'll open up our Power Pivot window here and go to Diagram View. And what we can see is we've got our sales and our budgets table here. And I'm going to go and link my category and my category here. I always like to do this kind of work as well, where we hide this from Client Tools and hide this from Client Tools. Now the next component that we need is we need a calendar table to link our budgets and sales together via their date columns. So I'm just going to close the Power Pivot window, and what I'm going to do is I could create one of these manually. I've got a recipe for doing this with Power Query, or I could use one of my favorite features, which is our Calendar Monkey. Now the Calendar Monkey is basically a wizard to help you build a dynamic calendar that always covers the entire range of data inside your data model. We support building 12 months, 445s, 13 fiscal periods. For me right now though, 12 month is perfect, but I don't want to be using a December 31st year end. So I'm going to go and click on this here. I'm going to change this to my year end, which is September 30th. Note that it picks up the year 2023, which is out of sync with the data that we have, but that's okay. It will actually work it back smartly to get it to the right area. We can name our calendar table here, choose to load it the data model, which is the obvious choice. And then we have to pick our start and end date periods. And what we're looking for here is the column within the model that is going to have the earliest date ever. Now in my case, I'm going to find this on the staging sales table, and it's going to be the date column. You'll notice that we actually try to go through and identify which columns are actually date type columns. My latest date is going to come from staging budgets because we always budget before sales happen in my business. And there we go. I'm now going to go and click next. And it pops up and says, all right, well, by default, we think that these are the columns that you actually probably will want inside your model. You're going to be looking for a fiscal year, quarter of fiscal year, month of fiscal year. You might be looking for the month name in short format, your day of month, day of week, and day of name in short format as well. You can obviously check any or all of the boxes that you want here. And what's kind of cool is that we learn from your experiences here so that next time you go to create your calendar table, you'll find those default choices are actually marked so they'll be checked for you in advance or unchecked as the case may be. I'm now going to go and choose next. And it says, would you like to add some relationships? I'm going to go and check the boxes on these two. Sometimes if you've actually chosen to build your calendar off of those exact same tables, those boxes will be pre-checked for you. But in this case, they're not, so I have to check them manually. And then I'm going to choose create. And what you'll see here is that we actually automatically inject a start date and an end date query. That's the date for the calendar to start and end. And then we go and load the calendar, in this case, 1,096 rows. You'll also see that there is some advice that's given you here. This is for the things that we cannot do for you because there is no API for them. So if I go back to Monkey Tools and manage data model, it's a couple things that I need to do. Number one is I need to hide the foreign key for the date. So I'm going to do that. Right click and hide, right click and hide. And as a matter of fact, while I'm here, I'm also going to grab these amount columns. I'll get rid of those because we don't need to see those either. We can see that we've got our nice little calendar here, but the one thing we do need to do is set up sorting hierarchies. I wish I could do this, but unfortunately I can't. So I'm going to come over to my calendar table and choose to sort my month short by the fiscal month, or so there we are, month of fiscal year. And I'm going to sort my day short by the day of week. And there we go. That sets up my calendar beautifully so that my dates should now work for my pivot table. Now, of course, if I'm going to go and build a pivot table, the next thing I need if I'm working with a Power Pivot model is I need some measures. So We have a couple of different options for working with this. The first one is basic explicit measures. One of the things that drives me crazy is that there's no easy way. When you just drag a field into a pivot table that's unaggregated, it makes an implicit measure. And I'm not really a big fan of that. I prefer explicit measures. And I wish you could just right click and convert it to explicit or have it go as explicit by default, but unfortunately it doesn't happen. So in this case, your basic explicit measures allows you to look at individual columns like budget's amount, and it will come back with some smart aggregation choices for you on these things. In other words, if it's text-based, we're not going to let you sum it or average it. If it's date-based, your max and last will actually come up with last date. So we try to be a little bit intelligent about what we actually preface it with. You can see that the formula is being built right here as we go through. That's the deck signature. And you can name it here and even change your formats. Having said that, I'm not going to do this because I need to create 3 of them. That would take a little bit of time. So I'm going to be super lazy, I mean efficient. And I'm going to go through my multiple explicit measures monkey. And what the multiple explicit measure monkey is all about is creating multiple explicit measures, as you might guess, all at once. Now, there's a few options here about which tables to show. In this case, it's recognized what our linked fact tables are here based on the data model signature. So we're going to go and choose next. And it comes back and it gives us a choice for creating measures. Now you'll notice some colorful pieces in here. We're starting with the budgets table. It said, hey, I've got an amount column. You're probably going to want to sum it, and we're going to call it sum of amount. Down here, our fact table for sales also has an amount column. So this is a conflict. This is the first instance of your conflict, and every conflicting item will be listed in red. I'm going to change the name of this measure to budget dollars. And you can see that there's no conflicts anymore. We could now have this one called sum of amount. Having said that, it's a terrible name for a measure. So we're going to go and change this to sales dollars. Now we can put in whatever format we like here. I'm going to choose to put this in as a currency with no symbol and no decimals. I'm going to do the same thing here for my next one here for sales. But before I leave, I'm also going to go and add one more explicit measure. So down here under sales, I'm going to go and add another aggregation. And we get the option to make additional aggregations for the amount column, for category, for date. And then this one here, sales, is actually the name of the table itself. So I'm going to choose this one. You'll notice that the only option we have for our sales for the actual table is to count the number of rows, where other columns actually give us the ability to do different things. Why am I counting the number of rows? Well, because this is my transactions. I'm going to use this one as a whole number, and I'm now going to choose to create. And boom, 3 measures have just been created immediately. So that's pretty darn cool. So now let's go hop back to our summary sheet and see whether or not we can actually make this exact same pivot table layout. So here's the deal. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up to the pivots and filters menu on Monkey Tools. You'll notice that these buttons exist elsewhere in Excel, but they just happen to be here in a handy place so we don't have to switch back and forth between tabs. So I'm going to create a new pivot table against the data model. I'll drop it right in there. That's perfect. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's go to our calendar table. Let's put our fiscal year on rows, and let's put our month short on rows underneath. We can see that it's laid out from October to September. That's great. From my sales table, I'm going to add transactions and sales and my budgets. And there we go. I have a nice pivot table that's formatted the way that I want to see it. Notice that it's inherited the number of formats that I chose, and everything there looks pretty darn nice. Now, what if I have some crazy measure pattern that I want to put in here? Well, as it happens, I have one. It's stored inside my BiblioMonkey. So if I go over and take a look here, I have a time intelligence pattern for month to date for X months prior. And this is tagged with a lot of stuff, but what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to choose to inject it. And you'll notice that right away it's going to come up with the name that I had here. So I'm going to do a month to date for, I don't know, how about 1 month prior? That's fine. I'm going to store it on my sales table. What is the date column I'm working with? Well, I actually want my calendar date. The number of months to subtract is 1, and the measure that I'm basing this on is going to be sales. Now, you could argue that these descriptions that I put in here could be better, but what you can't really argue is at the end of the day, when I hit inject and hit enter and go and add it to my pivot table, you can't really argue that there's a faster way to get that kind of stuff done. Now, these measured numbers might look a little bit weird. Trust me, it is actually calculating correctly based on what I put in there, but it's pretty nice. If you've got a template of different patterns that you want to use for these things, you can store them in BiblioMonkey, tag them, and have them inject directly into your particular models. Again, remember, on the free version, you would have to copy that signature, go into your Power Pivot Measure, New Measure, and paste it there, so it'll still help you get it contextually correct because those replacements will actually work if they're tagged right. Now, what other tools do we have to help you out here? Well, maybe you're interested in something like Query Sleuth. With Query Sleuth, we can actually go and take a look at the entire lineage of the query chain that actually feeds into our calendar query. Let me just go and uncheck or hide my legend here so we can see a little bit more. But you can see we have calendar. It feeds from start date and end date, which are highlighted. Here's my end date query, so we can scroll through the whole thing, nicely indented so that it's a little bit easier to read. That comes from staging budget, so you can walk the entire chain through these things. Green tables loads the data model, yellow ones come as connection only. I can hit close. I can make light edits there if I want. I don't really need to right now. And we get similar functionality under our DAX Sleuth. Notice in this case here that you actually have your sales measure. This was the sum of sales amount that we created. Let me just make that a little bit bigger so we can see it. We've got transactions, and we've got our entire lineage chain. If I double click our month to date, 1 month prior, you can see that sales feeds into it, and this is the measure. Notice that last date, calendar date, these were all put in via our prompting. It showed up in 3 places, even though I really only had to define it once. So this is pretty neat stuff, being able to actually go and drop this in. We also, in your Pro license, have the ability to go and select the pivot table where this is actually used. That's pretty cool too for an audit perspective. Indent them, unindent them as well. Lots of different features available here. And finally, the last thing that I want to show you here is that while Query Sleuth and DAX Sleuth both work under a free license, you don't get all the color coding, but they do still work there and they indent and everything else. This next feature doesn't work 100% on a Pro trial license. This one requires full Pro. This is what we call our model sleuth, and it allows us to go and run a full documentation of our model to figure out what our relationships are doing, what the data sources are doing, our individual stats around compression and unique values are here. All of your measures are listed, your queries are listed as well here. So there's lots of information from documentation that just gets pulled up into a nice report very, very quickly through our model sleuth. In addition, if you're into tracking things like, say, memory usage, you can actually get a nice little memory usage chart here that shows you how much is in use, what's not being used and recoverable, as well as the ability to go through your models and figure out exactly which items have not been used at all. And we actually look at queries, columns, and measures. So from a model health perspective, you may find that this is a very, very useful tool that can help make your models lean, mean, and efficient. Again, a lot of these features going through, things like Table Monkey, Calendar Monkey, and the Measure Table Monkeys here, these are all Pro license features. Things like Query Sleuth and DAX Sleuth have a mixture of features in them, and Model Sleuth, those reports are the only ones that don't actually function fully on a Pro trial, but do require a Pro license to work properly. Thank you for coming to my presentation on how to boost your Excel efficiency using Monkey Tools. If you're an existing Monkey Tools user, I thank you, and I hope that you've picked up something very cool along the way today that will help actually make things even a little bit easier for you in this vast tool that we actually have. If you haven't started using Monkey Tools yet and you'd like to get your own copy, you can do so by visiting monkeytools.ca. Just scroll down the homepage and all the options to download or purchase are right there for you. If you're looking for a full listing of features, you can find that little link in the top right-hand corner, because honestly, I've probably shown you about 50% today of what features are actually even in Monkey Tools at all. And finally, if you'd like to learn how to use those features, don't forget to check out the knowledge base right at the Monkey Tools website, which will help point you in the right direction. And on that note, thanks again for watching, and I hope you'll give us the chance to show how our monkeys can help you build better models faster.
Thank you, Ken. That was Ken Pulse's video on monkey tools. Okay, the following was a sponsored. No, it was Ken. Welcome back. I'll just put you on camera for a second just before you disappear. Now, Ken has to shoot off in a second, and again, Ken, I'm trying to. Oh, you've gone on this time. I know you've got to go in a minute. And I know you've been busy in the Q&A, so if people see the questions in that, I think you've answered both of those already. So I thought what I'd just do is give you a second just before you disappeared to actually just say, you know, what would be your final leaving thought, given this will be your final leaving thought?
You know what? Try the software. I think you'll find it'll actually make an amazing difference to how you work and how much faster you can work with Monkey Tools. You know, the number one thing that I think is probably one of my favorite features that we have in there is just the fact that you can actually name a table when you're creating it right off the bat, so you don't blow up your Power Queries later. Something I wish the Excel team had done years ago. I finally got tired of waiting, and that's available to everybody. You don't even just install it. You don't even have to get a license for it. It just works. So give it a shot. Let us know how it goes.
Well, are you going to be making available those things behind you? I'm just looking at the I Love Excel over your right shoulder, the monkey there.
The monkey, that's my sounding board. You know, whenever I've got some crazy idea, I go and ask him and see what he says about it. So no, I can't let him go. I'm afraid not.
No,
integral part of my development.
Ken, I know you've got to shoot. I know you're a busy man. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, do drop him a line in his contact details. I'd be delighted to hear from you. He's a very experienced one. He's far from the shrinking violet. No one has an opinion on everything, don't you, mate?
Maybe. Awesome. Thanks for having me, Liam.
Cheers, Ken. Thanks very much.